Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Nardone seminar series. We're delighted to have today my colleague Alvaro Cuervo-Cazurra, who is a professor of international business, colleague of mine, and a fellow of the AIB. And he has just finished a book, I think his fourth book with Cambridge University Press, with his co-author Miguel Montoya, who is a professor at Monterrey, and I think his second book with Cambridge University Press. The topic is a very interesting one. Is how do you innovate to serve the middle of the economic pyramid in the emerging markets? So I recommend this book to you. I'm holding up a copy here. It's got some terrific case studies, and they're going to share the main findings with us. They will present for about 30 minutes, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. And if you have any questions, I think you can hold them to that point till when they finish the presentation. So again, a warm welcome to everyone. I see some good friends. I see Bala Chakrabarti after many, many years. Hi, Bala. George, another colleague of ours, is also here. And then some of our other regulars. I see Alex Settles as well. So I'm sure there are others I'm missing. So welcome to all of you. We'll turn it over to Alvaro now. Take it away, Alvaro.
Thank you very much, Ravi, and welcome everybody to this presentation. And I also want to thank Dave Nardone, who is sponsoring this series of talks. So what I'm going to be presenting is a book that, as Ravi indicated, we just published. This book is something that is a work we have been doing for about 2 years in total, although the project started some 3 years ago. And what we want to share is some of the ideas and the findings, and we'll be more than happy to just have a conversation on the importance of emerging markets innovation. And then if you have experience of innovation in emerging markets, it will be fantastic. So for now, let's start with a few ideas that we want to share. So the first one is going to be, if you want, a brief introduction of why is this important. And we are focusing on the middle of the pyramid, and this is a concept that is important in the sense that for the most part, much of the perception of emerging markets seems to be a term that was coined by a Brazilian economist some 50 years ago. The term was Belindia. And he was describing the income distribution in Brazil. And for him, it was a nice metaphor in the sense that he indicated that, well, Brazil is not really one country, but it is 2 different countries. There is a relatively wealthy country, and this is the 1970s, that has an income level similar to Belgium and also similar in size. And then there is a much poorer emerging economy, and that has an income level of similar to India. And this, to some extent, is what you can think, or this is typical image that we have of emerging economies. They have tiny, really wealthy elites. They are global consumers. They travel, they purchase, and they buy luxuries. They pretty much are very similar to consumers in all advanced economies. And then the typical image is one of a very large class of very poor individuals. With this, the notion for many companies, especially for multinationals, is that, well, if the country is large in population, yes, I will have a market for my luxury goods, but I don't really have a much of a market for everything else. I will have to do too many complicated changes to the products to be able to sell to those very poor individuals. Maybe this is not something I want to do. Nevertheless, and this is what happened with the evolution of intellectual thought, some 20 years ago, a new idea came along, and this was the base of the pyramid. And this was an argument by C.K. Pehala in which he proposed that, look, let's go beyond this dichotomy. Let's understand that, yes, there is a base of the pyramid. Yes, and these are very poor consumers, but because there are lots of them, if you are able to create some kind of product that is very priced, low priced, you will be able to reap rewards from this very large market that is underserved. So with this, the notion was, if we take the income pyramid for the world, we, at the time, this was in the early 2000s, we pretty much have about 4 million individuals who are not being served by foreign multinationals. So, okay, so why is this important? Is there something we can do from, why should we focus on them? It's not because it is charity. It is because there is a market that is big. And also, and this is important point he was trying to make, the idea is that this market is used to pay a premium rather than a discount for products. And this premium was mostly related to the issue that distribution is erratic, is not very good for poor areas. And in many cases, poor individuals have to buy smaller quantities. They do not benefit from economies of scale in the purchase. They cannot go to very large supermarkets. They are too far away. They have to go to the small shops that are nearby. And there is always going to be inefficiency in the system. And they illustrated this with a comparison of two different neighborhoods in Mumbai, one which is Dharavi, which is apparently the biggest slum in the world, and then Warden Road, which was a middle-income area. And the notion here was, look, for very basic products, the same products, if you're thinking about credit, well, middle-income consumers are paying 10 to 12%. Yes, relatively high in comparison to advanced economies, but much, much lower than what people in the bottom, the base of the pyramid are paying. They have to go to loan sharks. And as a result, they are unable to benefit from the ability, access to credit and the ability to invest. For other products, it's something similar. If you are in the middle classes, say if you are in the middle class neighborhood, you have access to municipal tap water. It comes to your house, versus if you are in a slum, you have to go and buy bottled water. If you buy the medical medicine, instead of buying in bulk, you have to buy one pill at a time, or things as simple as rice. They were still paying much more because of the limitations in distribution. So with this, it was, well, this is nice. And then we got some ideas. It started to some extent a revolution, and it started forcing companies to think, how do we produce new products for the base of the pyramid? And we had a couple of examples. One of them was, and if you want, one of the most famous ones, the Tata Nano. This was a car that was developed in India. It was the effort and the desire of Ratan Tata, at the time the chairman of the Tata Group, to produce a car that could be sold for less than 100,000 rupees. And it was created, sold profitably, and this is the important thing. All of this is businesses. They are not into the business of charity. It was, can we produce a car design, produce, manufacture, and sell so that at this price point, we can still make a profit? The challenge with this type of products is that eventually the question is, yes, but is there really a market in the base of a pyramid? So yes, at the beginning, the target price was 100,000, but eventually, and this is what is happening now, the car is now being marketed at a much higher price. Partly with the notion that, yes, it's a nice story. However, it's not fully clear that the market is really there. The market seems to be what we discuss is the middle of the pyramid. And of course, if you want something extremely sophisticated, and they did this for a show, and they covered one of the cars in gold and gems, and they were selling it for $3 million. That's an extreme, but nevertheless, it also happens with other types of products. Chotu it's also a very good idea. And the notion was, look, one of the challenges of countries like India is that there is no access to refrigeration. And as a result, a lot of food is spoiled. So what can we produce? Something that is portable, that can, yes, be connected to the main, but sometimes the power is not there. It is very unreliable. Can you connect it to a car battery so that it can continue operating? Relatively simple to operate. no compressor, it's just based on a fan, and they were basically initially marketed it to lower income individuals and those who had little shops so that they could keep their food cool. Nevertheless, give it a few years and then there is an evolution, and yes, it's nice, but it's challenging to sell something at this price and make a profit, taking into account challenges in distribution. And now the product to some extent has evolved into something that we can call is a convenience product. You are in your swimming pool or you are going on an excursion with your friends and you bring your fridge, it keeps everything cool. Is not quite the same type of market. And this is something that we are trying to understand. Yes, the idea of the base of a pyramid is fantastic. However, the market seems to be slightly higher. This is what we propose, which is the middle of the pyramid. And what is this? And this is just the distribution of income for those with less than $3,000 a year. It's yes, the base of a pyramid, but this is the typical idea that there is a long pyramid with a wide base. It might be the case in some regions, but not in others. In the case of Asia, it seems to be moving upwards. And in the case of other regions like Latin America or Eastern Europe, it's pretty much inverted. If you add now all the income distribution of the country, the reality is that we have, to some extent, 3 types of countries by income distribution. And as a result, the idea here is that it is the middle of the pyramid that to some extent matters the most. Yes, some countries are still pyramidal in income. The vast majority of the population is really at the base. Innovations for this base are still important, and we are going to continue seeing them. Other countries have evolved into their economic development, and what happens is that actually the distribution of income tends to be shaped like a rhomboid. Much of the middle of the population, the middle income is the center of the market. And if we go back to what we know, which is our advanced economies, the vast majority of our population are literally at the top of a pyramid. And what we are using here is cutoff points which are internationally used. It's not the typical cutoff point of poverty levels that happen, for example, in the US, which is about $12,000 per individual. That's a national or a country level of income. Here, what we are talking about is international levels of income. And the notion here is that there is a very large middle of the pyramid, which to some extent we haven't really paid much attention. Why is this? Because we tend to think of innovations for two different markets, and what we want to do is introduce the third one. The typical innovation, which is what usually happens in advanced economies, we are thinking of high income individuals, and they, for the most part, have most of their needs satisfied. And what we are doing, I am also in the US, we are thinking about new products, we are replacing them, fun new features. I don't really need to replace them, but it's going to be part of my status symbol. I'm not running a car until it basically falls apart, but periodically I want a newer, better, something that has more things that what I'm used to. There is also the story of the middle of the pyramid, the slightly different market. This is middle of the pyramid for emerging economies. They used to be poor, now they have come out of that segment and they are getting into replacement. Yes, I used to be very constrained in my ability to buy products I desire. Now I can buy them better. I didn't have a very good smartphone. Now I can really get a much better one. It's a story of going into aspiration levels. And then we have still the importance of the bottom of the pyramid, in which, yes, we are still thinking of products for extremely low income consumers. Price is what determines everything. It's just something that is really basic and that people at the base are able to afford. So with this, let's get into the innovations of the middle of the pyramid in more detail. And what I want to show here is an example. Yes, it's a video of it's a commercial, but it does illustrate the idea that much of the innovations are moving away from the base to the middle of the pyramid.
Yes, baby.
Washy, washy.
Washy, washy. Come. You go and play. Mama will take care of this, okay? Give it to me. I'll wash it for you.
Don't worry, Ma, I'll take care of it. There you go.
It's even better than my hand wash.
Generations change, techniques change, but best remains the best.
So this is, to some extent, a good way to capture the idea of innovations for the new middle classes. You want the convenience, at the same time, there is a connection to once upon a time, life was harder, you were poorer. How do we get these type of innovations? And three different processes that we identified, and we focus more on, if you want, the second part, the last part, which is what Miguel is going to be illustrating, innovations at the base of the pyramid. Sorry, at the middle of the pyramid directed to them. Three different approaches from companies. One of them, down marketing or the simplifying innovations that I have already created for advanced economies. I have a product which is desirable, has lots of features. How do I take some of those costly features so that I can start pushing the price point at which I can sell it at a profit? It tends to work sometimes well because you build on the image, you build on the brand, on the reputation. It does have a limitation in the sense that if you start lowering quality, you might undermine the perception of that desirability of the product, how good that product is going to be. And in many cases, consumers are going to note that, look, I thought I was buying this better product. Why is it that you are selling me this much lower version of the product? So that's one way, which is take sophisticated products designed for a higher income individuals, simplify them so that the middle classes, the new middle classes can afford them. The other alternative is a marketing. You take very basic products that low income, poor consumers are used to using, and then start adding new features so that you basically can, on the one hand, sell it as a better product, on the other hand, ask for a premium on that product. And to some extent, that was the example that I provided before with the Tata Nano that you do call, the sense that, yes, I start at the base and let me just make it more sophisticated. And of course, the price is going to go up. One of the limitations is that the consumers may not perceive this product as the aspirational product that they want, as if you want the new middle classes. And the third one is the process that we identified in the book, which is innovating for the middle classes, designing products strictly for those new middle classes, starting with, yes, there is going to be a price point that we shouldn't cross, but let's try to pack as many functions, as many features, and then let's think about how do we redesign the production process, delivery process, so that these features can be provided at that particular price point. In many cases, this works very well. And the surprise here is that it tends to be local companies that are ones that are good at it, because managers, because the engineers do understand both the needs of the consumers, and at the same time, they do understand the needs of the context of operation. So I'm going to leave it here, and I'm going to pass it now to Miguel, who is going to provide a much deeper explanation of some of examples that we identified to come up with these ideas. Miguel, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alvaro. Good afternoon from Mexico. Before I start, thank you very much to Ravi and to Northeastern University for the invitation, and thank you, Alvaro, for inviting me and to work in this. Yes, I will give some examples. Here is the old companies that we analyze in the book by the different chapters. Say that each chapter is writing by a different colleague, a different faculty member from different countries, most of them in Latin American business school or university, but some of them in Europe or some of them in United States. We have a chapter with 4 different companies working in the health sector. We have another chapter that we work with different universities or schools who works, of course, in the education sector. Then we have a chapter who works with 3 big companies who works in building or auto building, their own house for these middle classes. Then we have a chapter with different examples of giving credits, banking to this sector. Then we have a chapter who works with production, having goods for this part of the population. Then was very interesting that we find a chapter that these new middle classes in the emergency market, they also have time to get fun. So we have a chapter for entertainment or traveling. Then we have a chapter of banking, like that, new banks for this sector. Then we have a chapter for micro insurance, hedging for the new for this sector of the population. And then we have a chapter of value change, or how to offer or to get these goods for this sector. So that was the book, plus an introduction, a conclusion, of course. Where are those companies located? And we have companies from Argentina, we have companies from Guatemala, from Bolivia, from South Africa, from US also, from Brazil, from Chile, from Colombia, from Peru, and from Mexico. We try to have companies and examples in the book from different parts of the world. As you see, more Latin America, but for different parts of the world, different countries we analyze. I will show you some of these examples, only some of these examples. As you can see, we have a lot of companies there. For example, this is a great example in Mexico. This is Farmacias Similares. That is a low cost and medicine. What they say, they have a pharmacy, a generic pharmacy, in some nice, in some interesting or populated street in the cities of Mexico, but also in Chile, in Peru or Guatemala. And that they have just behind there is a medical doctor there, a doctor office, where you could have a consultancy in that office for less than $2. So you go there, you get your consultation. There are medical doctors, graduates from nice and good universities in the country that they are located. You could get your recitation, and if you want, you could go to the same pharmacy to buy the drugs. But you don't have to go there. If you want to go to other place, so don't buy anything, you could do it. But at the end, it's pretty interesting how they work. Farmacias Similares, the business, put money in a foundation, and the foundation rent this small office for the medical doctor. This is pretty interesting, and see the prices. In this, in Mexico, in this period, post-pandemic, when the pandemic was a pretty important thing for keep the health there. They don't have vaccines, of course, but they helped it a lot. They have more or less the same medical consultation per year than the Social Security in Mexico. This means around 100 million medical consultation per year in this kind of medical consultation. This is Farmacias Similares. The other example that we choose is Electra and Banco Azteca. This is a big chain to sell, electronics, motorcycles, cell phones. They have their own bank there, Aztec Bank, and they sell by credits. As you can see there, they have the total price, but the most interesting is the weekly payment. This means you could get your smart TV, your refrigerator, your motorcycle, wherever, your washer machine, like in the advertising that we saw with Alvaro, and you could pay it by cash if you want, or credit card, or you could take it by weekly payments, no? And that gives a big opportunity for them. It's pretty interesting because the upper part of the pyramid, the middle upper classes or some faculty members, no, say that they charge a lot of interest rate. And it's true, the interest rate is high. It's much higher than having an American Express or a Gold Visa card, but it's the only credit that this part of the pyramid has, because the other thing is going with familiars or relatives, and usually it's much more expensive. And the interesting thing is no collateral. That is interesting in these companies like Electra, they have a lot of IT there. You need a lot of technology to try to do this, to give this amount of this amount of credits to a lot of people, and with weekly payments. This means there's a lot of paperwork there. So this is why they choose to, they decide to have this a lot of IT, no? And also, as you can see a little bit there, you could, if you are a Mexican with relatives in the States or in other parts, you could receive transfer money from in the same bank, okay? The other example that we have is Clínicas del Azúcar. It's a diabetes treatment there. It's leading in the north part of Mexico. And there is very interesting, here's two things. It's one-stop shop for the patients. If you have diabetes, you will see the doctor, the nutrologist, you will have all the testing, all the exercises, everything in the same place. And the price of the treatment is very, very low. Compared with a treatment in the States, is less than $200 per year, the whole treatment. And it's very interesting of this model. They are in Monterrey city mostly, but they're expanding to the north part of cities in the north part of Mexico, is that they are running, of course, there are medical doctors there, but they're running, this is the founder and one of the owners. He's an electronic engineering from Tec de Monterrey with a master's degree in the MIT in innovation. And that they say is that the way to innovate in this market won't come from the doctors, won't come from the guys from other industries that brings new ideas to the treatment. And is the way to also with a lot of technology to have these very good treatments, very low price. Another example is La Zapopana. It's an ultra low cost dental clinic, no, that they work 24 hours per day, 7 days in a week, no? They offer a standardized low-cost dental service, no? They have Frankenstein, and this is interesting. You see the prices, $6 per extraction and $7 for an iron. Only for give you an example, they have these buses, and they go to the factories or populate neighborhoods to give the treatment. So you could go to the clinic. If you feel bad from some thief or something in the middle of the night, they send you a taxi or Uber car that picks you up and go to the clinic at any time in the night. And when they finish, they send you back. And of course, the Uber or taxi is much more expensive that you will pay for the extraction or whatever they do at the middle of the night. But the thing is growing and growing the amount of customers, loyal customers to have there. And also is one-stop shop. If you go here, you will have all kinds of treatments in the same clinic. You don't have to go to one clinic to one treatment and to a different clinic to a different treatment. You always go to the same clinic. We also have, this is an example in Peru, Hospital de Solidaridad, Outpatient Hospital. As you can see, they have the hospitals in all containers, in a very simple buildings. Also, they have some of these hospital in all trucks and in all buses from the schools in Canada and in the States that they send it to Peru, to Lima, and they put the hospital there. They are always in front of a public hospital. In fact, at the beginning, there was like a public-private partnership, where the Lima County in Peru and this private group of medical doctors, they work together to have it. And that they show is that you could have ambulatory treatments in one day, very low price, very, very low price. Of course, not for free, but just 1/3 of the prices in a private clinic. They are so successful that when they started, they say, we will put the containers here in this street, and we will move it in 1 month to a different street. The neighbors didn't allow them to do that. They say, no, the hospital will stay and keep here, because it's a great ability. It's so successful that even, in the south part of Peru is the border with Chile, a much rich country, or richer country than Peru, Chile. And the guys from the citizens from the north part of Chile, they cross the border to Peru to have the treatment. They say that the Chileans get full all the hospital in Tacna, this city in the south of Peru, or Chileans prefer the Peruvian city to buy drugs and visit the doctor. It's so interesting. Maybe it's like Americans crossing from San Diego to Tijuana to see the doctors and things like that. But it's a very interesting interesting model. Also, one model of microcredits is this OXXO GMP. OXXO is a big Mexican, but now in Peru, in Colombia, and Chile, and Central America chain, grocery chain. Is like some kind of 7-Eleven, if you want to see it. A GMP is a big insurance company in Mexico, and they start this weekly paying micro insurance, and you buy it when you buy your Coca-Cola, or when you buy a bottle of water, or when you recharge or buy credits for your telephone, for your cell phone, you buy your insurance, And for example, some example figures in insurance is $8 for a coverage of 1,300, or accident death in the car, insurance is $5 for $2,500, or accident insurance for $8 for close to 4,000 American dollars. So this is it's easy to buy it, and it's a complete success, of micro insurers. And the last one is this airline that is Viva Aerobus, that is a low-cost airline, ultra low-cost airline. Our countries, Mexico is a big country with mountains. Colombia is a country with a lot of mountains. Peru is a country with a lot of mountains. Chile is a very long country. Argentina and Brazil are very big countries. So using the bus is not a good idea, because it could be 2 or 3 days in the bus to go to one place to another. So the same owners of the bus company, they start to have a air company, an Airbus in this case company, and start to fly. And it's amazing. It's amazing how there a lot of Mexicans, Colombians are flying for the first time in these planes that are very brand new planes. And see, for example, the prices. A 2,000-mile flight from Mexico City to Tijuana with the border with California will be for $100. So and this open at the beginning was trying to move people to see familiars, relatives, or to go to the States to see familiars or relatives in the same case. But now the people are using this Viva Aerobus low-cost airline for travel. This means that the people are going to the beach for the first time, or visiting Mexico City and going to see the Virgen de Guadalupe and visit the different church, the very Christian and Catholic country that is Mexico, or is the same in Colombia. So you start to have fun and time for having vacation with these ultra low-cost airlines. And here we finish the examples, and some way that Alvaro and myself trying to put the companies is what is the social objective of the company, and what is the type of imperfection addressed. And for example, the first is a social objective of the company's primary, and what imperfection they address is a governmental imperfection. For example, we don't have enough hospitals, or we don't have enough good schools, or we don't have enough schools who teach English. So these kind of companies are there. That you see is more education and health. Also, if the social objective of the company is primary, but the imperfection addresses is more for the market, we call it social entrepreneurs, no? And here you have these companies who help to build your own house or micro insurance or things like that. Then if the social objective of the company is secondary, but is addressing an imperfection in the market, we call them a development capitalism. And here you find some schools and universities. And if it's an imperfection in the market and the objective of the company's social objective of the company is secondary, we have this that we call social capitalism. So at the end, we're trying to put all these companies, these 4 different parts, no? And the conclusion, and I will try to finish here, but please, Alvaro, add whatever you want, no? Is, as Alvaro explained, middle of the pyramid is a new market, large and growing, no? In Latin America, in India, in some places of Africa, South Asia, Eastern Europe, no? Different needs for poor and rich, no? In the same country, and this is misunderstood, we believe. Different innovation process, no? Rather than adapt down market or up market, there are innovating from the beginning, no? Price and create innovation with aspirational features, and also is innovation with impact, no? Trying to help or to address the government and market imperfections. They come from entrepreneurial outsiders. This is important. You find medical doctors in the banks, you find engineers in the clinical. So it's people from outside of the box who came and rethink the process, no? Usually in the rich country, we see it with the health right now, no? For example, in the United States, improvement in the service raises the cost. And in these kind of markets, in these emerging economies, improvements in the service must lower the cost. Improving the service and raising the cost is not be a good business for this. So we are finished here. I don't know, Alvaro, if you want to add something, or I will stop sharing. Thank you very much for the invitation and your attention. Open to questions, of course. Thank you very much.
Alvaro, do you want to add anything before we start questions? Or do you want to dive into questions? I don't know if you can see the chat.
I think I'd rather go into the questions and conversation.
Okay.
So, are these, question from Evodio, are these more radical incremental? Yes, in the sense that they are radical for the market. Many of these are process innovations, and this is one of the big differences with the way we tend to conceptualize innovations in advanced economies. We tend to focus on the new shiny product that nobody has. The vast majority of these innovations are processes. And as a result, we think that, well, they're kind of obvious. The case of pharmacia is similar. Is you have a pharmacy, you put a doctor next to it. How much of an innovation is that? It is big for the market. Understand that this is a market in which, up until a few years ago, about 70% of the population did not have medical insurance. That meant that they got sick, and in many cases, they couldn't go to the hospital, and many of them tended to self-medicate. This changed everything when all of a sudden, look, for a couple of dollars, you go to the doctor and the doctor can see what is happening to you and can recommend the medicine that fits your particular illness. It is huge for the market, but if you are thinking about, is it going to be something completely new? It's not that complicated, but it does generate a lot of creativity. One of the limitations, and this is if you want another extension of this, in terms of the story of radical versus incremental, is the story of how easy it is for competitors to replicate this. And this is one, on the one hand, limitation for the company. I'm not going to be able to recover, if you want, my innovative efforts. On the other hand, it is good for the country because all of a sudden this gets diffused to other companies. And the case of pharmacias Similares, it started in Guadalajara, and from there, other competitors started looking at them. And then the result is that now most of the pharmacies in the country have this particular model in which they do have a doctor next to it, because they have realized that, look, we are not solving only the problem of low-cost medicines, which is important for poor countries, but we are solving a much bigger problem, which is the lack of access to medical care. Similar stories happen with the other, the low cost, the Viva Bus and the low cost air travel is not new. We have seen this in other countries. It is how you reorganize the process so that you can really push prices down that becomes, if you want, the radical innovation in that sense. The good thing, these innovations get diffused. Yes, it is a limitation for the companies, but it is good for the countries. In some cases, the companies have become multinationals, building on these models, and they have gone to other countries in Latin America. We haven't really seen them going outside emerging economies. And this is, if you want, one of the limitations of these innovations being good for the new middle classes. They might not transfer well to advanced economies. One, if you want, question, and this is the story of, I'm connecting to the next question, which is the story on rich countries. One of the limitations might be coming from regulatory standards and needs. And this is something that Ravi has done work on, which is the story of reverse innovation. And also he has done work on innovating healthcare in emerging economies. And yes, we see all these fantastic examples in those economies. We don't see them in advanced economies. Why is it the case? And my suspicion, and Ravi, you can step in with your knowledge, is that much of it is regulatory backlash, and maybe it is the incumbents trying to prevent newcomers from getting into their turf. If you can have a heart surgery for $2,000, and in the US that same operation is going to be 20, 40, 100,000, of course, incumbents are going to push, prevent innovators from coming in. Ravi, what is your view on this?
Yeah, I think the regulatory barriers, certainly in healthcare, I think that's a real issue. But even without the regulatory barriers, there are, one of the, I actually gave a seminar this morning, and when talking on similar issue, that for some, if you think of the whole set of innovations that may be happening in poorer or developing countries, not all of them have a mechanism for the transfer of the innovation to other countries. Now, so the examples that we talked about earlier in the context of reverse innovation involved multinational companies that already had a global presence. The challenge for them was how to do something that uniquely was required for India. But once they did it, somehow if they did it, moving it to other parts of the world was relatively easier because they already had the infrastructure, the brand, the distribution, and so on. In the absence of that, either the local company has to go global, as you're saying, or go international, which we know is a tough journey, right? You make a lot of mistakes. And especially if you're moving from middle income, low income country to high income market like the US, you have challenges. And if you don't do that, the only other way is for somebody in the US who goes on a trip to Peru and happens to see something, just like someone in Peru happens to come to the US and says, you know what, hey, maybe we can do this in Peru. That's not a very efficient, very quick method of diffusion. So I think there is a challenge of how you diffuse good ideas from one part of the world to another. I think that still remains. Let me just mention that the person who asked the question, Rakesh, runs a consulting business in Brazil. He's from India, but he runs for many years consulting business in Brazil. And so he knows Latin America. He knows these countries. So Rakesh, maybe one of your clients in the US, now that you're in the US and California, can steal some of these ideas and replicate them in
I see an opportunity for private equity actually, because I think
Okay.
these guys can benefit from capital from the US and maybe scale them up through the region, for instance.
But I agree with your premise of your question that there is an opportunity for these innovations because there are poor people in rich countries. I mean, that was one of the reasons we thought reverse innovation could happen is because just like Alvaro touched on the rich people in poor countries, the top of the pyramid, there are people who are looking for value. They're not as poor as the poor people in poor countries, but they are looking for value, and solutions with some of these features can appeal to a segment. It may not be the mass market in the US, but certainly a segment. Relating to that, I see there is a question from Dave Nardone. Dave, nice to have you. It's 6 or 7 in the morning for you in Bangkok, I think. Thank you.
I'm still in my pajamas.
For those of you who don't know, Dave Nardone is a double husky from Northeastern and is supporting our seminar series and in multiple ways, including being part of the audience for many of our events. So Dave, why don't you ask the question yourself?
I think it's really interesting. I mean, at least on the list you've seen, I haven't seen the book yet. I didn't see many multinationals. I think it's really interesting opportunity, and particularly where people are trying to expand to larger markets and larger opportunities. I know like in rural Vietnam, we see in some homes when we're doing some CSR, there's just like a simple concrete structure, but in fact, there was this aspiration for a washing machine. Electrolux seems to be like very popular in the rural areas. It's really amazing. I'm sure it's a different model than maybe the Electrolux we're going to use, but it seems that brand opportunity like LG, but that should be a different LG machine. And I just wonder how much the multinationals are addressing this market since it's such a large market.
They are, but they have to do things differently and they have to localize. And this is one of the biggest challenges because they have to push the prices down. And in the case of LG, and it's a beautiful comparison, LG versus Samsung in India. Both of them are Korean companies. Both of them are in between the perception of quality of the Japanese and the perception of quality of the local Indian companies. And they took very different approaches to the market. Samsung went for we are a global company, we sell global products, we are importing them from Korea or other factories, and we are going to price at the high end for the most part, the high level income market in cities. LG went local, and it was, look, India is a very large country. We have to produce locally so that the costs are going to be lower. We have to distribute locally, and that was the biggest challenge for them. It wasn't so much the cost of production, but it was the cost of distribution. How do you take that washing machine to rural India? How do you take, in the case of Vietnam, so that you can still price them at a low point? And it was mostly a desire to basically go into, we are going to create innovations for the market. In some cases, they have gone deep into that, and it has been mostly a story of you have to be with local managers who do understand the local requirements. They have created, and this is not something, it's a different example, a TV that has, at the same time, a way to repel mosquitoes by emitting a high frequency sound. And apparently, this is something that in advanced economies, you don't think about it because, hey, your windows are closed, you have air conditioning, there is not a problem of mosquitoes. In emerging economies, that's not the case. You don't have the AC. So they started with this. They now added that to the AC systems, which are at a higher level, if you want, in terms of needs. You're going to buy a nice television. You may not get all the way into an AC until you get a higher level of income, but it was mostly going local. And something similar to the case of Sap Miller, South African, American, and then going into the emerging economies. My argument will be it is the local managers, the ones who do understand the local markets, and especially the ones who are aware of the needs and the limitations of the consumers in the middle of the pyramid. Managers in advanced economies, engineers in advanced economies don't understand those challenges. Typical story that, yes, you can produce very fancy mobile phones, but you have to understand that in emerging economies, you have to have a mobile phone that is going to be strong enough to resist water and dust and not have a very good battery or electricity access. You have to do things that are different. It is the local managers, it is the local engineers, I think, the ones that do understand these things.
May I add something, Ravi?
Yes, please.
A few ideas are related with the question. One is, as Alvaro said, they do not invent the product or the service. Farmacias and medicines, they don't invent the medical doctor consultants, or the guys from Clínicas del Azúcar, they don't invent the diabetes treatment, or the Viva Aerobus, they don't invent the planes and the low cost. So they take it and they put it to a different part of the society. This is interesting. Why are they not multinationals? Some of them are. Farmacia Similares is in 4 different countries. Viva Aerobus is in 3 different countries. Otsu is in 2 different countries. Cemex is with this market, new business is in different countries. But I think that one of the reasons that are not multinationals is that because most of them are service companies. No, they don't produce goods. They offer service. And that as Ravi says, is difficult to send it to other places. And at least for Mexico and other countries, they could do that because there are a supply of well-trained professionals. So how do you have 5,000 or 6,000 medical doctors? Because in Mexico, we have universities that we have medical doctors. This is why when we see how the treatment of the COVID-19 in India is so different than in Mexico, and is so different than Central America, because we have a big supply of medical doctors, a horrible government, but a big supply of medical doctors. So this is why this is interesting. And the other thing is, in most of the cases, with some examples, there are companies that the heart of that company, the soul of that company, is the owner and founder, and they are having big problems to institutionalize in order to go to other countries, in my point of view. Thank you very much for the questions.
Yeah, great. I think Daniel had a question. I missed it early on. Alvaro, if you want to, maybe we have time for one more.
Yes.
Daniel Friel says, what extent is this a new phenomenon? Daniel, if you're still there, what does this refer to? Is it if you want to clarify that, many of these companies have been around for a long time, you say. Yeah. Daniel?
Hello, yeah, can you see me?
Yes. And
Yes,
hear
hi.
you.
Good. Yes, because I mean, looking at all these different companies, I mean, these companies, if you look at it, Bimbo, Natura, all these different companies, they have been around for a long time. Mm-hmm. It seems like they're doing new things, though. So the phenomena is, this phenomenon that you're describing, maybe for some countries it's new, and for other countries it's not so new. And this depends on the evolution, because I'm thinking of Brazil, for example. In Brazil, when the middle class arose, the first thing people did was buy refrigerators, because they didn't have refrigerators. So this is really what you're talking about. But in other countries, not so much. And also, to what extent are these products really new? To what extent do the companies really develop new products for them? Or to what extent are they really selling maybe their original products, bottom of the line products that they, for example, the washing machines, the LG washing machines. So you have low line LG machines in the United States. And then all of a sudden you sell them in an emerging market. So to what extent is it new? Are the products really new? To what extent are the companies really new? To what extent do these companies do maybe many other things? And this is just a small part of what they do. If that makes sense.
Yes. Care to respond? Yeah.
It's not And this is it's a great question because that's basically to some extent what we're trying to argue. And it's not a new product, it's not a radical product, it is the process that is different now. And it comes in two different ways or two different drivers. One is the middle classes in many of these countries, to some extent, thanks to, if you want, economic liberalization, globalization, they have grown quickly in the last 20 years. And yes, there have been some ups and downs, but we have a very large segment of the population which was poor, which was living hand to mouth, paycheck to paycheck, and those were not really paychecks because it was cash based, it was completely irregular transactions. Now they are moving into having a more or less regular income, and as a result, their aspirations, their attitudes towards consumption have changed. They want better, they want more, they want to feel like they have made it. That's one story that is, to some extent, relatively recent. China is if you want, the biggest example in the transformation of the country, but this has happened in other countries, Southeast Asia, South Asia, Africa, Latin America, Eastern Europe, if you want, there slightly earlier on. Then we have the other story of companies that, for the most part, focus on the poor or the rich. And now they realize, hey, we have a middle. This middle is slightly different. It is not the poor, which we are going to be selling the same thing we have been selling them for decades and decades. We have to make things better. We have to make things much more sophisticated because they are demanding better products. And this is, if you want, those two different drivers. The products might not be new, completely new, radical innovations, but it is the delivery process, it is the service, it is the distribution, it is how you are enabling people to access services and products that before they couldn't afford. That's, I think, the story that is different, and that's what I think is going to continue, barring some huge economic collapse, which is something that to some extent is associated now with COVID. Once we get out of this crisis, the story is, it is this middle classes, it is the process and rethinking the products and especially the services that basically needs a new approach, and also the story of companies trying to some extent, compensate for the deficiencies of the government. Many of these were public goods. The governments are unable to provide them. Companies are stepping in and delivering these public goods at very low cost for these new middle classes.
Well, I'm afraid our time is almost, we have about 5 seconds left. I want to bring up one question that someone asked, and that is, where can you get a copy of your book? Which I thought was a great opportunity to let people know how to order the book. Online?
Yes, it is online. It is available at Amazon or Cambridge University Press.
You should make sure the Northeastern bookstore has a few copies, at least. You know, they don't sell many copies, but they do display faculty books. So we want to make sure you put it in there. Thank you very much. Great issue and great examples. I feel that the richness of the cases is really what gets me excited, because I think each of them tells an interesting story of some kind of innovation. Whether that is entirely new, whether that is for the bottom or the middle, sometimes I'm not sure from the examples, you know, and some of the classification of calling Saab, SAB, Miller, social capitalist, I have some problem with that. But that aside, I think the issue and the questions you're raising, and as with any topic that's new and being studied for the first time, you're going to have to, you know, difficult to get your arms around all of the issues, but you've opened up lots of interesting questions for all of us. And I see Rakesh actually had a couple of suggestions, if you can see in the chat, or questions that he didn't get to, that you may find those helpful as well. So with that, let me thank all of you for joining us in the summer. You know, we are able to do this now even in the time of the year when normally university completely shuts down. Thank Alvaro and Miguel for the book and for sharing your insights from that research. I suspect our next speaker will probably be as part of the India lecture series, Dr. Soumya Swaminathan, who is the chief scientist of the WHO, has agreed to speak, and we're in the process of trying to find a time, whether to do it in July or to do it in the fall, but you will hear from us. Thank you all for, again, for attending, and thank you, Alvaro, and thank you, Miguel.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.